Hey everybody, how's it going? Today we're going to be thinking about some of the foundational ideas that drive our constitutional convention that we're going to be practicing for the next couple of weeks, this sort of long-term simulation. I really want to take a minute in these next couple of videos to think about democracy, what it is, what it means, what it isn't, and some of the specifics of democratic design, which I think is really, really important for us in helping the people of Genovia, certainly, but also in better understanding how our own system works or fails to work in a variety of ways. Let's get started with that discussion. Certainly, right, our most basic, most foundational definitions of democracy hold that power resides with the people. This idea that instead of some sort of monarch, some prince of Genovia having some sort of divine right to control a country and to determine who gets what, right? To have that power. The people have that power. At its most basic, at the very end of the day, the people are the ones who are able to determine who gets what, when, and how. Which, if you think about it, right, if we go back to some of these political philosophers who are operating, around the time of the American Revolution, that's a pretty radical kind of idea, right? This idea that it's not a monarch that has this kind of authority to rule. It's not some, sort of very small group of people. It's not, any other, a single dictatorial kind of person, right? It's the idea that everyone has some say in who gets what. And specifically, I think this is important going back to last week's discussion of collective action. The idea is that citizens are able to make determinations of who gets what, when, how, why, collectively. They're able to get together and they're able to in some way agree upon the best course of action. So essentially a democracy is this question of who gets what, why, and how is solved collectively by the citizens who have essentially consented to a government by the people. And so that's, an easy definition. But after that, I think when we start to think about some of the details of this setup, things start to get complicated quickly. So one way that we could think about modern democracies is that we've got some components, some features that make it particularly democratic relative to other systems. So again, last time we talked a little bit about authoritarian systems where you've got essentially one political party that's dominating the contestation in a specific country. So, we said that government, one definition we saw last time was it's an arena for contestation. And so, one thing we might say is we've got an arena where multiple groups can interact, can actually duke it out and determine, which of these set of options is most preferable by the people. Another thing is we might get a chance to determine, who gets to enter that arena in the first place with a set of elections that are, we might consider free and fair, where we're able to then all have a say, right? In this kind of representative democracy, which is essentially the kind of the only practical way to do it in a large-scale modern country, these elections obviously are really important. And of course, we can't, forget about the fact that these elections in the US case are coming up very soon and are going to be very determinative of the question of who gets what, when, where, and how for the next 4 years and beyond. So a lot of theorists, though, have gone beyond what we might call these limited definitions of democracy, which is to say democracy is just having elections. It's, if you've got multiple parties that are competing in free elections, it's a democracy. Other scholars might say, there's other stuff we need for us to have a democracy. For example, we might need free information, free access to information. So a robust, a free media where you're able to say whatever you want, within reason. And, that way the government can't control, the source of information that people are learning about their government through. Another thing might be, a basic level of economic equality. This is definitely, again, getting into the realm of contested definitions of democracy or definitions that people argue over. Some scholars would say that we need a certain level of equality in a country for something to be truly democratic, because having more financial resources essentially means that you'll be able to participate more effectively in politics, meaning that if we've got a few people with a ton of resources and a lot of people in poverty, then the scales of democracy are being tipped in one way or the other. Other people might say that's not really a requirement as long as people can still vote, right? That's enough essentially to classify a country as democratic. We've also got things like civil rights. Right? We've got this idea that there are certain guarantees where you're able to have access to for example electoral institutions, but other forms also of protection where the government is interceding to make sure that you're being treated fairly in a society. And then, of course, if you recall from the last set of video discussions, we talked about civil society. Going back to the French explorer Alexis de Tocqueville, who visited America, long ago in the 1800s, observers have noted that American democracy is stronger because of its civil society, where we've got a lot of different groups out there that are not attached to the government. They're not part of the government in any way, but are rather part of sort of their own civil society arrangements. So everything from church organizations to clubs to unions to the AARP, other kinds of organized interests. We've got all kinds of different groups that they're not holding office, or they're not politicians, they're not running candidates, but they're allowing people to get together, meet, have conversations, and ultimately put collective pressure on government. So a lot of people would say if you don't have that civil society, if civil society is limited, then even if you've got free and fair elections, it's still not truly a democracy. So again, these definitions are debated in the literature today. And while some people hold more limited, more sort of basic definitions of democracy, others argue that we need kind of all these bells and whistles in order to call it a real democracy. Now, I think one of these individuals who we should really think about is a political scientist who passed away not that long ago, Robert Dahl, who is really one of the most famous political scientists out there. Somebody who I think, if there's one name of a political scientist that you might want to remember by the end of this semester, Robert Dahl is definitely a good one to know. Robert Dahl is one of the people out there who had been thinking about democracy and how democracy works and what makes for a good democracy over the span of his very long career. And I think his definition is a good place to start in this debate. And he envisioned at least 5 criteria, at least 5 things you generally need to have in order for there to be a good democracy. And again, I want to mention this is just one definition, so it's not the definition. Right? We're no longer in the world where there's just one answer, right? In a college level course, like this is something where occasionally we encounter contested definitions, but I think that this is a very good one to learn because it is pretty foundational. A lot of people have built their own definitions off of this one. So think about as we advance here what you're thinking about your own potential definitions. So I want to talk about these 5 criteria. I'm just going to introduce them now. It's effective participation, equality in voting, gaining enlightened understanding, control over the agenda, and inclusion of all adults. And so in the next video, I'm going to take these apart and sort of think about them one by one in a lot of detail, and because I think they're all very important discussions, and hopefully something that we're going to be able to animate a little bit more as we go in our Genovian constitutional simulation. So I'll see you on the other side of the break.